Chris Salazar with Lobo Off-Road, and today we're going to be showing you how to install the Lobo Off-Road adjustable rear license plate bracket. So we're going to start off by opening the box and showing you everything that is included in the kit. Now that we have it unboxed, you can see that we have the three parts that came in the box. We have the main mounting bracket that bolts to the tailgate, the bracket that the license plate bolts to, as well as the license plate light, and our hardware pack. Within the hardware pack, you have the connectors needed to connect the provided license plate light to our provided wire, and then also the connectors needed to tie in our wire to the existing factory wiring harness, as well as a shielding cover and zip ties to zip tie up the wires so that they don't get caught in anything. And the last thing is the one mounting bolt to actually mount the whole kit to the tailgate itself. So as you can see here, the factory location for the rear license plate is in a vulnerable spot and is consistently getting hit, whether you're on a mild trail or a hard trail. Now, the Lobo Off-Road license plate relocation kit relocates a license plate from a vulnerable spot to a less vulnerable spot by moving it up and attaching it to the tailgate. Not only does it move it up away from and giving you more ground clearance and less chance of it getting ripped off, we also provide an adjustability to move the license plate in and out to, depending on what size tire you have, you can move the license plate farther in to not overhang the tailgate as much, or move it out to clear your 37 or 35 inch tire. First of all, I do want to clarify that you do not need to remove your spare tire in order to install the kit. However, we removed it in order for you guys to see a better visual of what we have going on. Step one, I would take some blue masking tape, try to slide it behind the logo the best you can, and then stick it to the body in order to prevent yourself from accidentally scratching the tailgate itself. So now that we have it masked, there is a pin located roughly about here and here that we want to push in the detents and then pop off. However, there is also some double-sided sticky tape behind the entire logo here, which it is going to be pretty difficult to do. Sometimes you can get it without actually breaking the clips off, but the majority of the time that I've done it so far, the clips seem to be the failing point. So now I'm going to take these two thin spatula style tools and stick one right on top and then one in the bottom. Now that the badge is removed, we need to remove the broken pin as well as all this double-sided tape, and then also remove the masking tape. We're going to use some contact cleaner to help soften up the double-sided tape to break the bond of the tape to the tailgate itself. Doing this, it'll scrape a lot easier. Another thing is, if you have the time, it would be good to, like, the contact cleaner, spray it on and then let it sit and soak for a little bit longer and then come back, and it'll help soften it up versus being anxious and just trying to tear it off right now. Now that all the double-sided tape is removed, now it's time to mount the main bracket. So the main mounting bolt hole is a 10mm bolt. So make sure to wear your safety glasses and then go ahead and take the main bracket. These two nipples will register in these two existing holes, like so. After that is registered, go ahead and take a 10mm drill bit, stick it in the 10mm hole, and go ahead and drill the tailgate. Now that the main mounting hole is done, now we want to do the hole for the wires themselves. So again, register the main bracket into its slots, and then take a 1/2 inch drill bit and drill out the next one. After both holes are drilled, either use a countersink or a larger drill bit and then deburr the two holes. And go ahead and remove all the tape. And the last step before you install the bracket is to make sure to deburr the inside of the holes, especially the 1/2 inch hole where the wires are going to be going through, because you don't want to create a short. So now moving on to the inside, we need to remove this panel as well as this panel. This panel has 3 clips, and then this one just has little tangs holding it in place. So with the small spatula, stick it in this top piece right here and start working your way down. And then go to the second one, and then now go to the last one at the bottom. So now for this panel, you could stick your fingers where the wires go behind the panel. Make sure to pop the bottom as the clips are along the bottom and there's hooks on the top. So just carefully pop and then just work the bottom. And then try to go like this and then pull it down. So one thing I like to do on these lights is strip the wire back a little bit more and then fold it over to create more meat for the butt connector to grab. Then I'll take the wire and just fold it over onto itself. Take the butt connector and stick it onto the wire. Make sure that the wire is all the way in, and then go ahead and crimp it. Do not shrink the connector until it is completely connected and it is plugged into its opposite end. If you shrink this end right now, you won't be able to get the male end into the female plug. After you crimp the wires, do a small tug test to make sure that it's crimped on there properly. Now that the connectors are crimped to the wires to the light, you can go ahead and install the light onto the license plate mount. Make sure that the wires on the back of the light go into this groove in order for them not to be pinched. You can kind of wiggle it back and forth and you can kind of feel the wires register. Then you can go ahead and line up the holes and then go ahead and use the screws that were provided and attach the light to the mount. Now that we have the light attached to the license plate mount itself, now it's time to attach the whole assembly to the tailgate. So you need a 6mm Allen as well as a 15mm wrench. And also, to get the nut started, I'm going to use a magnet to hold the nut in place while I start the Allen from the backside. Another thing that I like to do is I like to take the license plate frame and mock it up onto the license plate mount and then hold it up and then see which groove we want to be in for your particular tire size. Because we don't want this thing hanging off the tailgate to where it's asking to get hit and broken off and so on. But at the same time, we don't want to get pulled over because our license plate isn't exposed. So now to test fit it, I typically start kind of in the middle, like where this is flush. This piece is flush with that edge, just to kind of see where the plate lands in relation to the tire. So you can kind of see that actually worked out fairly well. If I did want to adjust it one way or another, I can even take the mounting bolt, and kind of just hold the back plate, pull the front license plate mount itself forward back, and then slide it one way or another until I find the correct key slot that works the best for my application. After that, you can count the number of slots per groove that are available to kind of get a idea of where this license plate mount needs to be in relation to the actual mounting bracket itself to put the license plate where you would like it. Now that we have the location that the customer is happy with on the exposure of the license plate, I'm taking the bolt and sticking it in the 10mm hole, sliding it all the way in, and very carefully let go, and it'll actually hold it in place for you to reposition and get to the backside to start tightening the nut. So now with my 6mm Allen and then also a magnet just to start the nut, because it's very tricky to get the nut to in its location, you can kind of just bend this to get the nut to go into place. And then get it to the bolt and then just start screwing the bolt, and then it'll grab the nut and suck it in. After the nut starts on the bolt, then you can grab a wrench and hold the nut for the remainder of the threads that need to be tightened. So the next step after you have the bracket mounted is to get the wiring harness prepped and ready to install. So you're going to install the two provided ends that are opposite of what you put on. So I like to put the female end on the power wire so that in case if the power is ever on and the connector is disconnected, it has less of a chance of touching a ground surface and shorting out. Where if we use the male end, it is exposed and is more likely to hit a ground plane and short out. Now that I have the connectors on one end of the wire, now I'm going to take the sheeting and start sliding it over the wire until it is all the way on to the connector. Now that I have the sheeting on the wire, I'm going to go ahead and tape up the end so that this does not fray as I'm feeding it through the other existing harnesses and through the panels, etc. So now with the taped up end, we're going to feed it through the hole that we drilled for the wires, and then grab it on the inside and then feed it up and over. Now that we're almost to the end, we can go ahead and connect the wires. Now that the wires are connected, you can go ahead and heat shrink them. One thing, you need to be very careful when you shrink these, as they are small wires and they will melt very easily. And you can also zip tie them in place, or even feed them through the hole that you fed the wires through, like so. So now that we're taking the wire and going up, we're going to go across, and then we're going to zip tie it with this existing harness to this junction. So the next thing, now when you get to this point, you have two options. One, you can undo the tape, pop this off, attempt to get into this with the wire, or you can pinch this, make sure that there's no wires where you're pinching. Like you can shove all the wires to one side of the loom, and then go to the opposite end of the loom and just do a small snip cut, enough so that the wire that we have provided can go feed into this loom and then come out the other side, where we will eventually connect it to the running lines. Now on the opposite end, we are going to do the same thing so that the harness can poke out. The reason why we want to go inside of this, because if we have two separate looms, that is more of a chance of it getting collected and pinched in the tailgate. So we're going to go over here as far as we can, pinch the loom, make sure that there's no wires, and then just do a small snip, and then feed the wires until they come out. After the loom is fed through, I also would like to add a zip tie to where we entered the loom. All right, so now that we're here, we need to remove this kicker panel, this little tiny panel up here, as well as this panel. At the end goal is to remove this panel in order to get to the junction that we're going to be tying into. So go ahead and start with your little panel poppers. Start popping these very carefully. And then sometimes even opening this door will help. Now that you have that removed, we can just stick the panel popper into here. Then we also need to pop this kicker panel for the passenger rear, just like that. And then this panel. So now very carefully, you can go ahead and start trying to pop this panel off. Another thing that we forgot to mention is if you have a soft top, there is a bracket that needs to get removed in this location. All right, so now that we have the panel loose, we need to remove the 3 plugs that are restricting the panel from being completely removed. So we're going to start with this one. After those 3 are removed, we can safely remove the panel. Now that we have that panel removed, we're going to go ahead and I pre-run this whole wire loom to this common ground. So the power wire itself is going to tie in to a blue wire with a light gray line here, but then the ground wire is going to follow the loom and go up to here. So with that being said, I hold the wire like this, simulating it being zip tied to the existing wire loom. And by doing so, I'm getting the length that I need to make it to the ground. When I get there, I will hold that, and then I will cut both wires and the loop. Now that that is done, now we can go back and do the same thing over and run the power and cut the shielding and then cut the red wire to be the correct length. We're going to tie into a blue wire with a gray line here. In order to give us more room to work, we're going to go ahead and pop this plug off, this plug, as well as this holder. So we have like a pitchfork style tool that can go behind those and then just slowly work it out. Now we can either cut or just take this tape and work it back until we have an adequate amount of wire to work with to splice into. Okay, so now that we've indicated the blue with the light gray wire, do not mistaken it for the blue wire with the white line on the opposite end. Blue wire with the gray line in between two green wires is the one that we want. So I'm going to cut it about halfway so that I have plenty of room to work with. After that, go ahead and strip it, and then the connectors, we're going to put the 1 and a 2 on one side and then one bullet connector on the opposite. So go ahead and slip on the insulator first, and then go ahead and apply the connector. Again, do a pull test, make sure it's on properly. So now that we have the blue wire with the gray line on it reconnected, we can go ahead and run this loom to go to where the red wire would be splicing in, which is roughly about there. Now we're going to cut the sheeting here, and then we're also going to cut the red wire. But remember, do not cut the ground wire, as it will continue to the common ground. While we're here, I'm going to go ahead and tape this before it frays anymore. And then now we can split this wire to the junction. And then now I'm just going to verify that that is correct, that we want to go to here. We have a little bit of excess slack. And then I'm going to cut the red wire right around there. Go ahead and put the insulator on. Go ahead and strip it and then crimp the terminal on. Now that that is done, we can go ahead and plug it in. Go ahead and tape this up. We can also plug this post back in. And then I would leave this one undone so that we have room to tape this. And then also I would go ahead and zip tie this up now. Before we get too far, while we still have slack, we can go ahead and strip and crimp a connector onto the ground wire. After connecting the terminal end to the ground wire and heat shrinking it, you can go ahead and start zip tying it up, as well as hooking it with the bolt to the common ground. So now that we have that all connected and zip tied up and we've tested it to verify everything works properly, now we are going to just reverse what we did, what we showed you, how to take it apart. We're going to assemble, make sure you pop all the clips in, make sure you do not pinch any wires, and then just put your license plate on and go and enjoy it.